Welcome to episode 161 of the Own Your Genius podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to use their education and their experiences to create dope businesses. I'm your host, attorney LaConya Murray. The recent passing of One Direction member Liam Payne has many people questioning what's going to happen to his various assets, including his registered trademarks. Yes, trademarks. Whether you're an individual, part of a partnership, or running a registered business, understanding how trademarks are handled upon your death is essential. But before we dive into today's episode, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss any insights on how to own your genius. Welcome back to the Own Your Genius podcast, where we discuss building businesses, growing brands, and what else? Owning your genius. I'm your host, attorney LaConya Murray, owner of Off the Mark IP Solutions. Off the Mark is a boutique intellectual property firm representing innovative entrepreneurs, aka geniuses, who are looking to protect their brand and grow their business with ongoing legal support and business mentorship. We have a good one for you today, so let's get started. Understanding, trademark ownership. So the first thing we want to talk about are the different structures of ownership for trademarks. So if you own a trademark individually, it's pretty straightforward what will happen to your trademark after your death. It's going to become a part of your personal estate. And you can specify in your will who you want to manage or transfer the trademark to after your death. But what happens if you're part of a partnership or have a registered business entity like a corporation or an LLC? Let's talk about what's going to happen in those instances. So first of all, we'll talk about what's going to happen in the case of a partnership. In those cases, the partnership agreement plays a pivotal role in what's going to happen to that trademark if you pass away. Usually this agreement is going to outline what happens to the partner's shares, and in that part includes the trademarks. Now, the partnership agreement and everything that's going to happen to the assets of the business when a partner passes away is really an example of why all contracts aren't created equal. So if the agreement is well drafted, it's going to have clear instructions for the transferring of the deceased partner's interest. However, if the agreement is not well drafted, those assets, that trademark and whatever assets that the partner may have, it can become a part of the partnership's assets, and it can go on to be distributed to the remaining partner's heirs. That's not what you're probably looking to do. So it's just what's going to happen to those assets is going to depend on what's in the agreement and what they say is going to happen and what happens at the dissolve if the partnership is dissolved. So you have to have a really well-drafted partnership agreement. I know there are people out there right now who are in partnerships and they don't have an agreement at all. So if that is you, go ahead and get with your partner and let's put something in writing and discuss, hey, if something happens to me, what's going to happen to the business? What's going to happen to these assets that we have? Just have that conversation and then put it in writing. Now let's shift our focus to trademarks that are registered by business entities like corporations or LLCs. In these instances, the trademarks are considered assets of the company. So you don't have to worry about what's going to happen to those assets if you pass, because they're part of the business assets. So the question is, in the instances of having a corporation or an LLC, that trademark is considered an asset of the company itself. So the death of an individual associated with the business won't affect the trademark's ownership directly. Instead, business will continue to manage that trademark or those trademarks as an asset, and the governing documents, whether it's bylaws if you have a corporation or operating agreement if you have an LLC, those documents are going to dictate how ownership, interests, and assets are distributed or transferred at the death of a owner. Again, that's why contracts are important, because we think about death, we're talking about death, but we also want to talk about what if somebody is unable to fulfill their duties because they're incapacitated in some way. What's going to happen to those assets? So what you want to do is make sure that you ensure a smooth transition, and you can do that. We got a couple of ways that you can do that. First thing is, if you own that trademark personally, include your trademarks in your will. Clearly specify what you want to happen to those trademarks when you're no longer around. This is going to help avoid any confusion or disputes among your heirs. Second, review your partnership agreements. Make sure that they include provisions for transferring trademarks upon a partner's death. If they don't, it's time to update those agreements. The third thing you want to do is regularly review and update your business governing documents. So that's going to be your operating agreement. That's going to be your bylaws. And by making sure that they're constantly up to date, that's going to ensure that your business entity's procedures for managing and transfer of trademarks and other assets are up to date and legally sound. Now, the fourth thing that I'm going to tell you to do to make sure that all this stuff is transferring smoothly is consult with a legal professional. You want to make sure that you have someone that specializes in intellectual property and estate planning. That way, their expertise will help you create a comprehensive arrangement that can protect your trademarks and ensure a smooth transition. Now, in closing, I want you guys to remember that trademarks are a valuable asset that require careful consideration in estate planning. Whether you own them individually, part of a partnership, or through a registered business entity, the fate of your trademarks upon your death is going to be specified by who owns the trademark and the structure of the business and any relevant legal agreements associated with that business. By proactively including trademarks in your estate planning, you can preserve the value of your legacy for future generations. But let me say this. So there is one thing, especially if you are sole proprietor and you own that trademark individually, right? It's one thing to pass that trademark on in your will, but you have to keep in mind, you have to remember that trademarks are only valid if they continue to identify the source of a good or a service. So bequeathing a trademark to somebody who fails to use it is going to make that trademark worthless. Meaning that if you give someone, hey, this is the trademark, or this is the business, or this is the trademark, here's a registration number, here's a certificate, all that good stuff, but they fail to continue the business, they fail to continue offering goods or services or licensing out to someone that's doing that, then that trademark is going to be worthless, because the new owners must actively manage and utilize the trademark in order to maintain its value and that legal protection. Because without doing that, it's going to be, the trademark is going to become abandoned and it's going to lose its enforceability. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, hey, who should I pass this asset on to? Make sure you're going to pass it on to someone that's going to be able to continue growing that legacy. Geniuses, thank you so much for tuning in. What are your takeaways from this week's episode? If you found today's podcast insightful, make sure that you share it with fellow entrepreneurs, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Let's take this conversation over to the Mark Legal community. I want you to share this episode with 3 people and have them meet you there. But you know what to do before you go. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and rate the podcast. Until next week, I want you to keep building your business, growing your brand, and owning your genius.